So they had to come up with a plan. Then they had to ditch the plan because they thought Kelleher was okay. They come out, like Cian Healy's on his knees in front of us throwing lineouts, just in case. Kelleher's on the pitch and Van der Fleer's thrown into the line out. Kelleher's still scrummage, but he's still in the defensive line, but he clearly can't lift his arm up. You can see he's carrying it limply, like Paul McGrath in Giant Stadium, and yet he's playing Test rugby. And the Scots must be looking at the footage today going, how do we not run at him? How do we not make that guy tackle?
Did they not?
No, I don't. I need to watch it back much more closely to say they'd make him tackle once, but I don't think they did. They didn't spot him at all. They didn't just kick the ball out. Get the ball off the pitch and make Josh Van der Fleer, make him throw the ball 30 times in the second half. Because he's not going to be able to nail 30 out of 30. He got 5 out of 8, which is really impressive, but you'll figure it out eventually.
Did Cian Healy warming up on the touchline on his knees throwing lineouts might have given them a heads up?
Well, Josh threw the ball into the line as well while Kelleher was on the pitch, so they should have known. And I think Ireland would have spotted that. And Scotland, if they did, they didn't do enough to exploit it, because they had 7 or 8 minutes there where Ireland were effectively playing with 14. And actually, I think you're safer playing with 14 than playing with 14 plus 1, because the 1 can't do anything. So if you run at him, he's compromised.
Yeah.
So I spoke to a lack of street smarts from that Scottish team, who have a very senior leadership team, a lot of experienced players who weren't able to exploit a very obvious Irish weakness.
Yeah.
And that's where they lost the game. And Townsend said it afterwards in press conference. He said they almost felt like because of Ireland's problems, they just had to turn. They turned up properly for the first half. The second half, they felt like they just needed to turn up, and it would happen for them.
Yeah.
But Ireland made it happen for them, which is the difference.
Gordon, give us your sense then. You've been out there in the throes and the chaos of Test rugby. Should the Scottish players have very, very quickly spotted the line-out situation? Scottish management, 100%. I presume, would have spotted it. Where was what should have happened here?
Like, it's so easy. I've been so spoiled with the teams I play in. It's not even I think what's pretty clear between a gap between these two teams is something that Ireland is an experience gap. So Finn Russell is a phenomenal player that is arguably the best at playing the rules that we're playing, that higher tempo game that we're playing in, because he's such a existential threat with the ball in hand, and everything we saw how good he was. But when there's two things. There's the game management of actually understanding and going, how do I exploit a weakness? That isn't necessarily 2 defenders and pulling a phenomenal pass out of the out of the top drawer, where Sexton would immediately be, okay, that's what the team sheet says. There's a guy who has only 1 working arm, we're going after him. Or if it's Conor Murray or Gibson Park or Peter O'Mahony, they're the guys who just go, well, lads, that's great. Here's a guy who can't tackle. Let's just take easy yards over there. They would immediately go after that thing. And I've played with guys like that. And it was Brian O'Driscoll, Paul O'Connell, Sean O'Brien, people who just kind of go, fundamentally, their rugby IQ is really high. And I think that's probably one of the things in Scotland that they're necessarily missing, because you never plan for an opposition having a prop in having 3 props in the front row, and for somebody else going in at that. Like the fact that Scotland they knew Ireland had to throw to number 2. The fact they couldn't defend that shows the on-field leadership just wasn't there, and where the Irish won, not to say that the Irish was any better on the day, but the Scottish weren't able to expose it.
It'd be curious to know, Gordon, if messages were being screamed down from the coaching box. They're clearly going to go to number 2.
If messages are being screamed down, you've already lost it.
Okay.
You've got, somebody should have been saying at half time, going, well, your man looks pretty goosed. If this happens, let's make sure to go after it. You'd think there'd be some sort of planning there. But this idea that you're descending on messages into a pitch to 15 lads who are blown out their hole, and somebody going, it's such a subtle message to come on. You can give that message to one person maybe and say, listen, so and so is off, can you get it? But their ability, unless you're the 9 kind of going, because I did see Ireland or Scotland were looking for Sexton in the short side a couple of times to try and get him to tackle. In the first half, they seem to be kind of focused on him to try and drag him into it. But then so they're able to do it. They just the messages feeding on, I don't think was ever something that was gonna change. That's that half.
Van der Fleer's first throw, Rory, on 47 minutes went over the back. Second throw went to number one, front of the line out. And it was interesting. Hugh Cahill in commentary said, well, that's what they're just going to have to do. As Gordon says as well, Gert Small, just restart the game any way they can. That's what they're going to have to do. What was your sense of what Scotland did to curtail that?
They just seem to be a second behind. And look, Grant Gilchrist is their line-out leader. He was suspended for the game, and they lost Richie Gray after less than 10 minutes. So they were, but like Johnny Gray's a really experienced player, and Cummings, they played together, or they have played together at Glasgow, I think, and they're both good players. Maybe they're not the line-out technicians that Gilchrist is, but I thought what really impressed me about what Ireland did was the aggression of the players getting off the ground, because we don't often talk about line-out jumpers. We kind of just expect them to do their jobs, and we talk a little bit about the throwers, because that is like it's the darts thing, the kind of trying to get all those moving parts together. But what O'Mahony, Ryan Baird, James Ryan did was they got off the ground, they got across the line aggressively, and they almost won collisions in the air to try and make sure that even though Van der Fleer's throws, which were pretty good, but obviously not at the same quality as an international test hooker would be, that they claimed the ball, they won the ball, and that's not something that they have to do that often. They often just go up and the ball is there on a plate, they bring it down, they play their game, and it's a lot of reps and training. It is a skill.
And were they borderline akin to France in Paris in last year's Six Nations, coming across the line a bit too much? But
no, I didn't think it was illegal. I just thought it was aggressive, and it was what they had to do, because they had to win the ball. It wasn't Dan Sheehan like 10 out of 10 every time. It was Josh Van der Fleer's 10 out of 10, which isn't anywhere near, and that's, but it was something that they had to go and win, and they were, you don't want to say they wanted it more than Scotland, because Scotland obviously wanted to win, but they showed an aggression, a desire, and an understanding of the situation, that they needed to go and dominate those spaces. You get into the space, win the ball and play, and the fact that they scored off Healy win the penalty at the scrum, Van der Fleer nailing the line out, and they score a try. It was just the perfect summation of the way they adapted on the day.
Yeah, it did strike me as Van der Fleer started hitting Irish hands from line out, and Cian Healy managed the scrum, which we'll come to in a second, and they get the try off those moments. Like the psychological blow to Scotland there, overwhelming, because Irish players, well, Gibson Park's on as well, Gordon, so their fitness is coming to the fore. These two ramshackle in you go and do your best lads are actually delivering in front of 60,000 at test level, and they're scoring from it. I mean, like, just the kind of psychic energy. By the time Lowe scores that second try in 56 minutes, despite all the injuries, despite everything going on, it's game over, Gordon. Like, you know what I mean? If you were in a rush, you could have comfortably flicked off the TV and say, I'll catch the rest later.
Yeah, well, I think my kids obviously had some sort of link to it, because they were suddenly asking me to get out on the trampoline with them. But that's exactly it, isn't it? It's just like Ireland, they had and it's also as well, there's a kind of probably a frustration that would have run through the Scottish team, that, other positions probably looking in going, why aren't they, why aren't they winning the Irish line out? And maybe, and they switch off for a second, and then the scrum, you're like, oh my, like that all, lives rent free in the Scottish mind, whether you agree with it or not. All those little things chip away at the opposition. So it's like it's winning the battle on the ground, obviously, but then you're also winning it, most importantly, up front. That psychological damage of winning penalties at scrum time with no hooker on it is just it goes so far. And then when you have the quality in behind, and Gibson Park comes on and just sparks things, and Lowe goes over, like the body language of the Scottish players, you're absolutely right. It was done and dusted, and like the amount of an effort, you kind of going, oh, could they come back? But then you just started seeing passes being flicked in behind, and that real intensity and accuracy and belief that was there was just it was just worn from them, and Ireland had worn them down.
There you go. That was but a taste of the full rugby conversation. As usual, you can get the full chat wherever you get your podcast. It's waiting for you right now.